Rape culture is defined as an environment in which rape is prevalent and in which sexual violence against women is normalized and excused in media and popular culture. Direct examples of rape culture can be seen every day in the perpetuated use of misogynistic language, romanticized use of sexual violence in pop culture and on social media, and the objectification of the female body. Rape culture can be found in many different aspects of our society. It is especially prevalent in our prison systems, where sexual violence is systematic. People behind bars can be forced into prostitution or sexual slavery. Rape is rarely reported in prisons, so the data we have currently is likely to be much lower than the reality is. In addition to this, sex traffickers often target women who have been recently released from prison. Rape culture exists because our society normalizes rape. We allow women to live in fear of rape and sexual violence and see its existence in our society as something wrong, but not uncommon. The term rape culture was first used in a film produced by feminists in 1975 titled Rape Culture. Its purpose was to raise awareness about sexual violence in society and to counteract its normalization. This documentary examined pop culture and media to find the connection between our culture's sexual fantasies and rape culture. However, even though the phrase was coined relatively recently, the principles of rape culture have been around for a long time. The phrase rape culture began to be used frequently in the 1970s in the media and public, originally by feminists to draw attention to the issue with normalizing sexual violence in modern society. The normalization of rape can be seen all throughout history, dating back to Greek and Roman mythology. Many of their myths perpetuate acceptance of rape as a privilege of power. This can be seen in the Greek myth of Antiope of Thebes, in which Zeus rapes Antiope, and she had 2 twin boys. Later in life, she married another man, but when it was revealed that he wasn't the father of her twins, she was forced to live the rest of her life in shame as her uncle's servant. Also, in Roman times, they enforced raptus law, which was defined as successful persuasion, and also as abduction or forced sex, suggesting that the victim's consent did not matter. Also, the punishment for adultery was death for all who participated, whether or not it was consensual. Rape in ancient societies was also seen as less of a crime against the victim and more that the rapist was stealing something from normally the victim's father or owner. The penalty for rape was often a payment to the woman's father, or the victim would be forced to marry her rapist in order to save face with society. Rape was also normalized within the Bible, which can be seen in Numbers 31 when Moses orders his soldiers, "Now therefore kill every boy and kill every woman who has been intimate with a man in bed, but all the young women who have not yet experienced a man's bed will be yours." This shows the strange stigma placed around virginity at the time. In some cultures, the rape of a non-virgin woman was not considered a crime because it was viewed as not damaging to her chastity. The majority of ancient cultures were extremely focused on lineage and chastity, so many restrictions were placed on women and their sexuality and allowed women to be viewed as property instead of people. These norms and cliches that were put into place by mythologies are now frequently used in modern times to subconsciously justify or allow sexual violence. Rape was redefined as a public offense under the Christian Emperor Constantine. He ordered that if a woman had given consent, she and her abductor would have the same punishment, being burnt alive. Even if she had not given consent, she was still considered to be an accomplice and was convicted as such. Laws around rape can also be seen in medieval Europe, where there was an established raptus law that made the punishment for rape and abduction equal, which made it difficult to punish the offenders and confused the ideas of consent and rape. There were also many construed ideas about the definition of rape. Many believed that a woman must enjoy sex in order to conceive a child, which is shown in Sir Henry Finch's book from 1627.
Rape is the carnal abusing of a woman against her will. But if the woman conceive upon any carnal abusing of her, that is no rape, for she cannot conceive unless she consent.
Also, many women who reported rape were seen as untrustworthy, or liars, and that their testimonies were not to be believed. This is seen in Sir Matthew Hale's declaration.
It is true that rape is a most detestable crime, and therefore ought severely and impartially to be punished with death, but it must be remembered that it is an accusation easily to be made, hard to be proved, but harder to be defended by the party accused, though innocent.
This declaration has shaped court cases to this day. It warned jurors not to trust a woman's testimony on rape cases, even though it has been shown that there are no more false accusations of rape than there are of any other crime. One such case was the rape of Artemisia Gentileschi, who brought a case against her art teacher, Agostino Tassi, in the Roman court in the 17th century. Although her art teacher was the one who had a criminal record, Gentileschi, as the dishonored woman, was forced to submit to torture in order to prove herself as truthful. Rape culture has continued to be perpetuated in current media and media from the late 1900s. Notable examples of these can be found in the movie King Kong, in which the character of King Kong was used to allow people to explore their animal-human boundary, which allowed the heterosexual male to imagine their rape fantasies. Another notable movie that helped to perpetuate rape culture is the 80s movie 16 Candles, more specifically the intentionally hilarious scene that involves Jake Ryan, the high school popular boy and the crush of Molly Ringwald, handing his drunk girlfriend Caroline over to Ted, the geek, and telling him to have fun. Jake tells Ted that Caroline will think Ted is Jake, and when Caroline regains consciousness enough to ask what's happening, Jake tells her that Ted is him. Somehow, this is all justified because the filmmakers portray Caroline as the wrong type of girl because she drinks and parties. The next time Caroline is shown, she's still unconscious and Ted is taking a photo with her to show his friends, who tell him he's a legend. Then, the next morning, Caroline says she had a feeling that she had a good time. The fact that she had to say that she had a feeling instead of a thought further verifies that she was not conscious enough to provide consent. Because to have a thought, one must be conscious enough to do so. This is played off as a joke because it is supposed to be comical that the popular cheerleader who would never consciously agree to have sex with a nerd did just that. Jake Ryan was the perfect boy for many teen girls who grew up in the era, and the fact that he was an accessory to date rape made him no less perfect in the eyes of many. This perpetuates the idea that rape isn't a bad thing, because if a boy as perfect as Jake could enable it, it obviously is not that negative. Movies such as these were very common, and this plot provides the underlying message that girls who party, drink, or have sex are asking for it, and therefore can't complain about being raped, and it isn't considered rape. This type of girl being raped is comical. Also, that boys are owed girls, so a good guy passing over a girl to a friend doesn't require consent, and that girls require male approval. Caroline loses Jake's approval because he grows tired of her, therefore it's okay that she's raped. This presentation of rape in the 80s led to the perpetuation of rape culture, and these underlying themes continue in our culture today, even if they aren't shown in popular movies any longer. There were very few movies in the 80s that presented a different narrative than that of 16 Candles, and those that did were solely done by feminists at the time when feminism was considered undesirable and annoying. Rape culture can still be seen in society today. A major example is the recent Kavanaugh case, in which Brett Kavanaugh's attempted rape was viewed as not a big deal because it was merely attempted instead of actually executed. We may never know if Kavanaugh is guilty of sexual assault. However, we do know that he is another far-right driven judge who does not see sexual violence as a national problem and does not believe that there should be federal involvement in this issue. This is shown by Kavanaugh's vocal support of Chief Justice William Rehnquist's ruling in United States v. Morrison. This case ended in a 5-4 vote led by Chief Rehnquist that ended important sections of the 1994 Violence Against Women Act. Until this case, rape was investigated by local police or state courts who often looked the other way, which led to reluctance to come forward and victim blaming. Congress declared these failures in the judicial system to be unconstitutional under the Equal Protection Law, and that it psychologically prevented women from performing their jobs to the fullest capacity. Rehnquist ruled that creating federal rules against gender violence was unconstitutional because it appropriated state police powers and utterly dismissed Congress's data of how women were negatively impacted economically and socially by rape. Chief Rehnquist's official ruling was as follows. In these cases, we consider the constitutionality of 42 U.S.C., which provides a federal civil remedy for the victims of gender-motivated violence. The United States Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit, struck down because it concludes that Congress lacked constitutional authority to enact the section's civil remedy. Believing that these cases are controlled by our decisions in United States v. Lopez, United States v. Harris, and the civil rights cases, we affirm. Brett Kavanaugh praised this decision, calling Rehnquist a judicial hero, and specifically mentioning the Morrison decision, calling it critically important in putting the brakes on the Commerce Clause. In Kavanaugh's controversial speech, he praises many of Rehnquist's decisions, stating that it is fair to say that Justice Rehnquist was not successful in convincing a majority of the justices in the context of abortion either in Roe itself or in the later cases such as Casey. In the latter case, perhaps, because of stare decisis. But he was successful in stemming the general tide of freewheeling judicial creation of unenumerated rights that were not rooted in the nation's history and tradition. These are not the only examples of rape culture in our society. It shows itself every day. It can be seen in the case of a 50-year-old man raping a 14-year-old and only receiving a 30-day sentence because she looked older than her age. The conviction of two athletes, Trent Mays and Malik Richmond, who were found guilty of raping a 16-year-old. The newspaper that covered it, instead of highlighting their horrible crimes, lamented the tragedy of the end of their careers and blamed the victim for ending their sports careers. And politicians distinguishing what legitimate rape is or is not, as well as stating that rape is something God intended to happen. The statistics on rape are horrendously shocking. They show that 1 in 5 women and 1 in 72 men have reported experiencing rape. Only 3% of rapists have ever served a day in jail. Only 2% to 8% of rape cases are false accusations, when nearly all of them are considered to be so. Rape culture is obviously a serious issue in our society, one that needs to be dealt with, but is very difficult to remedy. Some things that we can do is redefine our ideals of masculinity as something not inherently violent and begin to teach men not to rape instead of teaching women how to avoid rape.